In this video, all I'm going to do is start up Android Studio, make sure I have a device working, and setting a new project. There's nothing special about it. If you've done this before, you'll be fine. The only thing that I really want to show you is if I use this IP address instead of localhost, things will still work. So if I create a new browser, if I type in 192.168.0.7, which is this machine, and then go to sandbox and get data.php, things should still work fine. There we go. So it's exactly the same as using localhost, but we're now using the IP address instead. Okay, let me see if I can get Android Studio working. Now I'm using Android Studio 2, I do believe, and the same goes when I'm using iOS. I'm using version 2. These things are changing rapidly. You might find that code that you're using or any code that you see sort of online for tutorials may well be different to the code that you need to make these things work. I'll explain a little bit about that later, but make sure that you've got at least version 2.2 at the moment. In a year's time this will probably be 3.4. iOS is exactly the same. It's got a language called Swift, and that is changing rapidly. That's now on Swift 2, I think. So again, tutorials may not be useful to you unless you are actually working on the same version. So let's start a new Android project. I'm not going to explain too much about this. You should have gone through this in tutorials before when you loaded Android up. So I'm going to give my project a name, being, well, let's think, Android read data. Okay, I'm going to accept the defaults. As I've said, these things, the wear stuff, the TV, because all of these are coming out on a daily basis, new versions. A lot of the Android stuff updates quickly, and you will need to keep your Android Studio in sync with it, otherwise things aren't going to work. So let's just click next and choose an empty activity and click next, and we should be ready to go. You will have seen this. Make sure we've got backwards compatibility also checked. I've got the main activity and click finish, and we should get my project up and working. Android read data. I suggest that you really follow from Android developers any tutorials that they have there, particularly the early tutorials showing you how to get Android working, how to get your program on the screen. I'm just going to ignore all of that and assume that you've done it and just start projects. So here's my first one. So the first thing I want to do in my project is, when my computer's ready, and there we go, is take a look. You should know that we've got two files. We've got the XML file, Android main, the activity main, which really deals with what appears on the screen. So we're now using a graphical user interface, which we didn't before. We just used a text-based one. We've got to consider graphics, and then we've got our main program. Now things are going to be read until some point where it stopped building and it's all ready and they turn black. That could take quite a while. Everything you do builds. So if you write a line of code, it builds it, it checks it, sees whether items are accessible. Sometimes you may have to force it to build. We will see one or two items where we need to tell it to actually do a rebuild, otherwise things aren't going to work. So I'm going to hop over to my screen. Oh, that looks good. Not. And I'm going to go to the text version. I'm not going to try to design in the graphic version. I'm going to go to the text version and I'm going to design here. So the first thing I'm going to do, all I want is a button on the screen and some area where text will appear. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to change this from relative layout to linear layout. Again, to learn about these you really need to follow the tutorials online, not mine. And at the moment it's got information about how the screen will appear, and on the screen it's just got one small text view item which just says hello world. What I'm going to do now is actually run this app to make sure everything's working. You may have problems. You may have to actually play with your AVD manager, that's your Android virtual device manager, to select your own phone or your own tablet. What I've done is set mine up to be the same as my tablet. I've got about a 10-inch tablet, so I want my screen to represent a 10-inch tablet in portrait mode. You can choose whatever you like. What I can guarantee is that the look of your screen is going to be different to mine. Don't worry too much about it. There are several different versions, so if I press on the AVD manager, I've got lots of different versions and different size screens and different densities and different APIs that they will play with. I've set mine up. If you want to follow, I've got a tablet with a 600 by 1024 screen, medium density, for the lowest API, or the highest API, sorry, being 18, set to Jelly Bean. This has changed significantly. They keep bringing out newer versions to talk to the App Store or for the watch. They're all out. You could start it just by pressing start, and that would start your device. So okay, let's do that. Normally I just press run on the menu bar and the device starts. I can close that down while the emulator starts up. And what we're going to see, bottom panel, which is telling me what is going on in the background. We will use this to our advantage later. And then my emulator is starting up. If you have a slow computer, this could take days. I've got a relatively fast computer and it still takes quite a long time. So you really do need a high spec computer to make all of this work. I'm just talking over the top of it, waiting for it to begin. It will take a small while. So there we go. At this point I should edit out the video. I'm not going to. I'm just going to let it run a while so I can see all the messages that come up, and hopefully there's anything that I can explain to you, I will. Right, okay, so we've now got our emulator up and running. It's the same. You can shake it, you can move it, you can do anything you want. Click on there to open it up to start the app. Oops, my calendar seems to have stopped. Probably the date isn't correct on it. Now, I've got nothing working at all. And the reason for that is that I haven't run my program. So if I just run it, and remember I've done no programming whatsoever, I just run the app, select the device that I want, click OK, then you'll see on the emulator that this works and we should get a hello world message appearing on the screen. Again, the computer's whizzing and whirring away, and it is quite intensive. It's making my computer fan really boost. It's getting quite warm. Please ignore my waffling. So we're getting an amount of messages down here. There we go, it's finished. Up here we've got a message saying there was no errors, no warnings. There shouldn't be. I haven't written a thing. It's still building at the bottom. And finally we'll get a very simple program which just says hello world. Okay, we seem to be there. These messages that are appearing are really important, and we'll make use of those. or you'll make use of those, the more you learn what Android is about, particularly these messages, the debug messages. That's what the D stands for. You'll be creating your own to see what happens. So there we go, we've got the program name in the title bar, and we've got just the simple text message. To stop your program, do not shut your emulator down. If you do, it's going to take ages to start it up again. Just stop the program, it will be happy. So there we go, I've stopped the program. So we're going to be doing JSON text. What I want is a button so that I can press the button. When I press the button, it goes off and it talks to the database online. Information from the database comes back and it's presented to me on the screen. So I'm going to put a button on there and a text view. So if I just type an angle bracket to start the button, I don't know what the Windows version is like, but on the Mac we get an incredible amount of help that I shall be using, and I would imagine you've got the same intelligence on your computer. So I'm not going to explain what all of these do. All I'm going to do is set the layout width to wrap content and the layout height to wrap content as well, and that's created a button for me. I'm just going to put a bit of separation in there so we can see it nicely. There we go. What I do need though, because I'm going to be talking to my button in the program, I need to give it an ID. So I'm going to create another line. I'm going to type Android and then ID. When I do that, I get the help. Now I suggest if you do get the help, use it. Otherwise you will end up typing quite a lot and maybe making some errors, some spelling mistakes. So Android ID, first thing it wants is this plus ID. I put that in, and then I'm going to name my button. So I'm going to call it button press. Okay, so I'm fine with that. So I've given the button a name so that I can address it in my program. What I want on the button as well is some text. So I'm going to type Android text. And then normally I would store the text in a different file for good reason that I'm not going to go into now, but I'm just going to type my text in here, and I'm going to type the word press. So that's my button set up. I need to do the same thing with my text view. Because I'm going to be talking to it in my program, I need to give it an ID, and I also want to change this hello world from that to JSON text will appear here. Let me just uncapitalize that. And I just need to give it an ID because I need to address it in my program. So Android, again, if I just type ID, it comes up. I mean, typed I and it came up. So not happy, missed something out there, so I'm going to put in plus ID. There we go. And give it a name. I'm just going to call it JSON text. So I'll be able to talk to my text box by using JSON text, and my button by using button press. It may be better if I prefix that with txt, just for consistency. So there we go, that's our first attempt. What I'm going to do is run the program, see if I've actually got those two things on the screen before we go into any code. I'll give it a while. It shouldn't take too long. We can actually put the emulator on the screen. Yep, no warnings, no errors. That's all looking good. And away we go. So I've got my button and I've got my text box saying where the JSON text will appear. I can press my button, absolutely nothing happens, can't enter any text. So that's it, the job done. So if I stop that, okay, we are good to go.